the chairman of Bellco Capital, the executive chairman and co-founder of Allergen, and the founder and former CEO of Kite Pharma, one of the big successes of this region. But also really for buying into the vision of LABEST from day one, from 2018, and being the leader of behind the scene of growing this conference to an event that is the premier event of academia and industry in Southern California, bringing 1,000 people together year after year after year. So I know you're all waiting for the next panel. That is our traditional, The Business of Bioscience, a conversation that Arie will lead.
This is actually will be a little bit more of a comprehensive look at what does it need to take and create a biotech. So on this slide, I try to show that what you really need is, number one, you need the entrepreneur scientist. You need the scientist who understands how to create his technology and essentially bring it to a translation, to understand. And you heard yesterday, whoever was here at the MedTech Day, how the MedTech is starting to think. If you are developing a technology, we need to know, where do you apply this technology? It's not enough that you have great technology. How is it going to help and change patients? And I can tell you that today, when on my hat there's a venture at Vida Ventures, when a technology comes to us, immediately with all I learned at UCLA is how does it going to help a patient? If it's going to help the patient, let's reverse engineer. So this is the key, and you'll hear it today from our experts. The second one is obviously you have the idea, how do I get financing? Yes, we started 25 years ago here with some angel investors who gave us some money and help us to start the company. However, this is a very short-lived. It's great to have it because you have a company, but once you get to the milestone, you have to start all over. So that's why you need venture capitalists who understand that it takes more and more. You have round B, round C, and once you have those, that is the sign that you are recognized as a true startup biotech. Then, obviously, you need the management. How do you bring management to the company? At the end of the day, it's all about people and experience of management. And in biotech, I feel, as opposed to many technology, that there is an exit and these guys just go and enjoy their success. They are now a group of biotech experts who are repeated entrepreneurs, created one company, second company. These are the people that you really want because they understand the management. So management is important. And then you early on need to understand who are your bankers, where are the investment banking comes into play. Before the IPO, at the IPO, after the IPO, and that is an extremely important factor, that the earlier you meet, the earlier you know these people, they will take you, help you, and connect you to their own network of healthcare investment banking. And then, once you're an IPO, who will know about you? Who will translate the complicated science to something that an investor somewhere in the world can read at the report and say, wow, I love that idea. Who understands the CAR-T, how to simplify that? That's why you need the analyst. And it's very, very important to have your analyst close by to you. And finally, once you're successful, you need a big pharma. So without going to all of these details and the information, I think what we have assembled today is the expertise in all of these areas today. On the left, we have Tony Ribas, I don't think that at UCLA anybody need to be doesn't know him. But again, this is a outstanding scientist that did a lot of travel all the world in academia, the president of the American Association of Cancer Research, and then started moving and understanding that entrepreneurship is important and all of these components are important. And I think today he can write a book because he is in the world of startup companies, and we'll hear a little bit what does it take a great scientist also to move to the entrepreneurial world. Then we have Helen Kim from Vida Ventures. I've worked with Helen for the past 12 years. She definitely can fill two areas of expertise, not just one, because she has been a CEO, she has been a head of BD, she worked with us at Kite, she's now at Vida, so she can bring together the venture as well as management, because a lot of the companies are relying on her to bring the top management to the companies that we are invest. And then Farman, the head of healthcare at Bank of America, a good friend who has been with us for probably almost 20 years since the first time he was around us in one of our companies, Cougar Biotechnology, that developed Zytiga or Abiraterone. And at that time, he was a junior guy at Bank of America, but a real star, or at Merrill Lynch at that time. And today, heading all of Bank of America, banking in healthcare. And then Biren Amin. Biren has been a friend for probably 15 years, one of the top analysts on Wall Street, has changed different titles, but still writing reports. And I'll get to one of the reports that he wrote just this week because it's so relevant, and it will try to explain us and tell us a little bit of what he wrote. Last but not least is Howard Chang. And again, Howard is, to close the loop, he is one of the greatest scientist today in America, from professor at Stanford, got all the awards that anybody can get. Howard Hughes, multiple award for science, and was with us for on Vida advisory group for some years, till he had to leave because he accepted a major position at Amgen to design the next generation of science at Amgen, and he just joined a few months ago the group at Amgen. So I think that maybe I want a really short introduction of you guys, from each of you, and say, how did you make it to here to sit on this group, with this group? Tony.
So I'm a professor of medicine here at UCLA, but an event like this gives us an opportunity, which is from the top, from the people that lead our institution. We're seeing that we have to make an impact in patients. And the way our science can make an impact in patients is by taking it all the way and having an entrepreneurial spirit at some point to be able to bring breakthroughs to patients.
I'm Helen Kim, not from Amgen. There's another Helen Kim, who's actually a very good friend of mine. Helen Kim from Vida Ventures. I've been in biotech for about 37 years now. And how I ended up here, mostly because of Arie. I was ready to retire even before joining Kite. And after Kite, Arie recruited me back to his ecosystem with Vida Ventures. So good to be here.
Hi, I'm Ivan Farman. I studied electrical engineering as an undergraduate, did my JD MBA, started out practicing law, realized I was a failed lawyer, and switched to investment banking, and really enjoyed getting into the healthcare industry and the biotech industry. One of the first deals I worked on was when Vertex bought Aurora Biosciences after the genomics bubble burst. And in that acquisition, that's where Vertex actually got their CF franchise. It was a $500 million deal almost 25 years ago. But what I like about biotech is it's a great industry because it's innovative, it's fast-paced, it's very deal-making friendly, but it also impacts people and lives in a very positive way. To be able to wake up every day to feel like I'm in an industry that impacts humanity in such a positive way. And quite frankly, I live vicariously through my clients who are the entrepreneurs, who are the investors, who are really the ones who bring these medicines to market and make such a huge impact on people.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Howard Chang. Delighted to be here. It's such an inspiring session. I'm a physician scientist, so my path started at Stanford, doing really fundamental research, but always thinking about bringing those innovations to patients. So I had an opportunity then to have co-founded several companies and also working with Vida Ventures with Arie's guidance really kind of opened my eyes and sort of started my journey from being a gene hunter towards a drug hunter. And so 6 months ago, I had this amazing opportunity to really complete that journey by taking on the role of head of research and chief scientific officer at Amgen.
Thank you.
Biren Amin, I'm managing director at Piper Sandler. I started out in the industry about 3 decades ago within BD at a large pharma company called Aventis Pharma, which is now part of Sanofi. Learned a tremendous amount in, as I was starting my career in terms of the different aspects of pharma. And then I got recruited to Wall Street, wasn't really looking to move, and just really loved the fast-paced environment. And I guess the reason why I'm here is I was introduced to Arie in 2012 through one of my bankers at Jefferies. And so, they had just formed Kite, and the cell therapy, which I had never heard of, had never had experience with. And Arie talked about equity research and bridging, complex science, and how do we translate that to the financial community where they can understand it. And I remember going to the American Society of Hematology, and all of my investor contacts were like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Have you heard of cell therapy?" And pulled several of them into the sessions, and they were amazed. And to this day, some of them still remember those times where we were part of something special. And no one really knew where this was going to head, but we knew like this was saving patient lives. And it wasn't always a straight road, but I think, Arie and Kite and the entire team there were highly successful in terms of delivering what they promised to patients as well as the shareholders. So happy to be here. Thank you, Arie and Rebecca.
Thank you. So what I wanted to cover now is essentially three topics. What is hot today in entrepreneurship in biotech? What areas? Second is the biotech market today. There are challenges, but what should we do in order to deal with the market today? And the number three is prediction for the future, where things are going. Let's start with what hot today. Tony, you are traveling the world. What excites you today and why? What areas of science, translation, if you have to start a business?
The foundation in science over the past multiple years has led to all these breakthroughs, but this is not enough. And the science couldn't be better than now. We're at the level when we understand many systems in unprecedented ways and allow us to think what are the next treatments to develop. I'm excited about the new ways to knock out and knock in genes into T cells where we can redirect them and empower them beyond just putting one receptor that leads them to the cancer. the ability to do this without having to engineer cells, to have T-cell engagers, protein engineering that allows inside the body to bring immune cells together with cancer cells, which is my field, obviously. And then new approaches to drug what used to be undruggable. We're seeing so many examples of new classes of drugs, degraders that bind to a protein and lead to its disappearance, being able to interfere with protein interactions that lead to modulation of biology that before we couldn't intervene in. All of that is at an exciting time. What's not in an exciting time is the funding environment for these, both in academia and in industry.
Thank you. Specifically, when you're talking about the T cells in cell therapy, the downside and why the companies are suffering today, because the financial issue, specifically cell therapy, is expensive. And why invest in expensive therapies when we can give actually a pill? Why? You can see the examples and you heard today. But when you have to cut, this is the easy way to cut. And I'm sure that Dr. Epstein is hearing it the same at Penn, which is a leader in cell therapy and created what's called the Silicon Valley. I said we have a Medicon Valley, but there is a Silicon Valley. So that is part of the excitement. But let's move to Helen. Helen, what areas are you excited to fund in the funnel that you see? But maybe you can start. How many companies do you see in the last, or have you seen in the last several years? How many of them were eventually founded or funded, and how many of them are really moving to the next level?
So since the inception of Vida, which I believe was founded in 2017, we have 3 funds, total of $1.8 billion under management. We have looked at more than 4,700 companies. And looking at each company's, it's, very intensive. We don't do diligence in all of the 4,700 companies. There's this funnel that we use to look at everything from whether the science can translate to medicines. And we do that with working with our scientific advisory board. That's really critical. We try to meet every Thursday. And we also have venture partners like David Chang, who also helps vet the science. And then we also look at competitive landscape, intellectual properties, regulatory hurdles, and on and on. We spend a lot of time interviewing KOLs. We also reach out to analysts like Biren, and we get their feedback as to what the market may look like. However, it is really difficult to predict whether the drug or the company will be successful. No matter how much diligence and analysis you do, it really comes down to having a conviction on that investment or that company, and conviction also comes from having seen patterns over the years and using judgment and looking at pattern recognition in order to develop that conviction. So out of more than 4,700 companies, we've invested in 47 companies, and we're continuing to look at additional investment opportunities. We're modality agnostic. So small molecules, antibodies, other biologics. We've been a heavy investor in cell therapy. Cell therapy is moving from autologous to allogeneic, now to in vivo cell therapy. We invested in a company called Capstan, which one of the founders...
The founder is sitting on the first row.
There.
Capstan.
Capstan is a very popular company.
Too hot company.
Yeah.
Too of a hot company.
And they're already now in the clinic dosing healthy volunteers. It's CD19 in vivo CAR T being developed for treatment of autoimmune diseases. So we're modality agnostic. We tend to focus on therapeutic areas of oncology, autoimmune, allergy, inflammation, cardiovascular. We haven't really made an investment in obesity because, some of these therapeutic areas is very capital intensive to get to proof of concept. And as a private company, it's very challenging. These days, it's even more challenging to raise capital that's needed to fund to proof of concept.
We'll leave it for Amgen. We'll see. We'll hear about this a bit later. Ivan.
So, look, I think in terms of my clients and whether they be investors or they be large pharmas or big biotechs, what are they interested in? They're interested in big markets. They're interested in game-changing therapies. And where are we seeing that? We're seeing that in the cardiometabolic field. The cardiometabolic field is huge. We used to talk about $10 billion drugs. Now we're talking about $100 billion drugs. And this isn't just about weight loss, as Howard and I were talking about yesterday. This is about cardiovascular disease. This is about liver disease. This is about kidney disease. I remember we started 15 years ago, we took a company public, Orexogen, and then there was Arena, and these were like repurposed drugs being used for obesity. And they all went bust, or they kind of repositioned themselves. Sanofi had a big blow up in obesity. Everybody thought obesity was a dirty word. Now obesity is the hottest word in biotech. So obviously cardiometabolic is a big field. Oncology, huge market. Every pharma wants to be in oncology. Cell therapy has been a game changer. Now, I think the big field we're looking at is, as Helen mentioned, in vivo CAR T. You saw that AstraZeneca recently bought a company in this field. I think this can be a game changer in terms of the oncology field, both in terms of easier to manufacture, being able to address more tumors, and just impact. The other area that gets a lot of interest is I&I, immunology. It's big markets. I think a lot of what we're seeing there is what are the oral alternatives to biologics in I&I. And I think people like I&I because it's a big market, but it's also, if you find the drug in I&I, can often be a pipeline. You can take that drug and make it a whole pipeline. It's not just one drug. And then finally, the one area we're seeing a lot of interest in, and it's almost revived interest, is CNS. We saw J&J buy Intracellular. We saw BMS buy Karuna for a while. Everybody got out of CNS. In fact, BMS had given up their CNS assets. That's how Biohaven got created. That's how Intracellular got created. CNS is very risky, but it's a big market, and I think big pharmas are getting back into that market. And, there's some very interesting stuff going on with psychedelics, and a lot of people think that could be a very promising field and make a real change and have a huge impact in people's lives.
Thanks, that's great. Howard, maybe use two hats. Your hat, the Stanford head, the old Stanford head as the academician. What excites you in the science? And then what did you find in Amgen, and where are the things that you believe that Amgen will continue in the next several years?
Well, thank you, Arie. So I agree with Tony that I think the innovation has never been more exciting, and that spans all the way from basic discovery to the therapeutic modalities. Amgen has been a big believer in human genetics, and I think that the possibilities of now understanding both the non-coding genome, including using AI to understand the causes of human disease, is really going to break open the possibility of many new targets. The ways of actually drugging these targets are also really advancing. And I'm really excited about multi-specific targeting. So the promise of precision medicine is going after a target exactly by knowing the cause of disease. So multi-specific targeting means you can turn two dials at the same time, turn something up and turn something down at the same time. So there are 20,000 protein coding genes. If we can actually think about multi-specific targeting, that's basically 20,000 squared, right? Billions of potential possibilities. So I would say the example of a drug called Maritide, which is Amgen's obesity drug now in phase 3 testing, is a great example of that. It simultaneously turns down a receptor and activates another receptor to achieve this great pharmacologic result. We're really also excited about new opportunities in basically nucleic acid medicines, extrahepatic siRNA being one example, as well as other kinds of RNA modalities. And finally, I think AI is really powering kind of the ability to really design, engineer new kinds of molecules. And we've seen that, of course, with protein design. Amgen created our own protein large language model called Amplify to really, again, accelerate and take advantage of this new trend.
So I don't hear that you're excited about your own 5 companies that you founded, or what? Anything there, or it's history?
Oh, I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and definitely, and these companies span from nucleic acid medicines to new ideas in cancer. And so, absolutely, I think this is why, despite the challenges that we just talked about, there's still a lot of opportunities.
Biren, what's your favorite report to write? About what areas and what you don't like to write about?
I like to write about what moves the needle, which, in the last 10 to 15 years, we've had cell therapy and hematologic malignancies, lymphoma, myeloma that have moved the needle. We've had gene therapy and SMA that have improved patient lives. Gene therapy in retinal rare diseases that have improved lives. PD-1 antibodies for solid tumors. So, like, when you think about the next 5 to 10 years, I'm guided by what's going to move the needle for patients, which is, I think, on the oncology side, I think solid tumors is still a high unmet need. We haven't moved the needle in pancreatic cancer and colorectal cancer, whether that's done through cell therapy, small molecules like pan-KRAS inhibitors, or combination of those therapies or ADCs. I think, to me, I'd love to see advances in that area. As it relates to cell therapy, particularly, I mean, in oncology, yes, we've seen advances, but outside of oncology, I've been exposed to some companies recently that are working in epilepsy that have been able to reduce seizures by 90% with a one and done therapy. We've had recently heard about academic reports in Japan of cell therapy being administered in patients with spinal cord injury where they've regained function in the lower proximity. So to me, like, those are exciting areas. And then I think in rare diseases, we can tackle this through gene therapy, RNA editing, or gene editing. I think, having one and done or maybe even once a year therapies, I think will help patients and their caregivers.
How are you guys looking at gene therapy? You mentioned gene therapy. Is that also something complicated, expensive? And you heard today from Dr. Epstein about this one case which, you repair a defective gene, which is transformative, but it's an N of 1, and there will be a lot of N of 1s. How do you view that as far as a market?
I think that's a good question. I think with gene therapy, there's been success. There's also been some failure, right? If you look at hemophilia, we haven't seen commercial success. But then if we look at rare diseases like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, like spinal muscular atrophy, I think, those therapies have had tremendous success. And so I think, again, it's about, improving patient lives. What's the durable effect of a gene therapy? Is it sustainable over, 12 plus month period? To me, that's where, that's where it gets interesting. I follow a few companies that are working in CNS, for example, with gene therapy, Friedreich's ataxia. And it was a program that actually came out of Penn that they licensed a few months ago. And so it's a very novel concept that they're targeting both the cardiac manifestations of this disease as well as the neurologic manifestations of the disease, which has been, the barrier for something like that. So, it's very company specific, very technology specific in terms of, how are they addressing the challenges and how are they going to improve the patient lives. So I think you can't just say simply, okay, well, we're going to invest in every gene therapy, but it has to be, have they proven the data out through their preclinical tests as well as, early clinical testing.
We'll get now to the kind of more NIH, FDA, the challenges of the market today. But David, Chang, and I were just last year in a meeting with Peter Marks, where he described how he views the N of one in the academic, how they will support quick approvals. Well, this is some of the history. Peter is no more at the FDA, unfortunately, but we hope that somebody else will continue that vision, which is really important. Tony, regarding NIH funding, how is it going to affect you personally and your work, your activities, and what do you think and what do you hear in the academic world there?
Arie, we're going into an unprecedented time. It's the first time in my career that I'm concerned about the future of our research and on my own lab. Before, I would think if we do good science, we invest on ourselves. We carry on. If one grant does not get funded or another, you have to write a lot of grants to get funded. But some of them will be funded, and that's because there was peer review of science, and we were able to get investments into the labs. If they carry on with the changes that they're doing now, with this big cut in the budget of the National Institute of Health by 40%, which was on the bill that was passed overnight, where they start taking away the support to the institutions to foster this environment that allows somebody like me to show up on Monday morning and be able to go to my lab and everything else is working and what we have to do is do good science. They're taking this away from us. And it's going to have a big impact in every field, including trying to develop therapies afterwards. And it's going to take years. I think it's going to take decades to get us out from the hole that is being dug right now. And I'm sorry to be so gloomy, but you ask, and I think every research here would agree.
We need to know what's ahead of us. And anything you hear about the FDA, have you heard any issues, delays? A lot of the leaders are not there anymore, so the juniors are being promoted.
I have such respect for anybody who works at the FDA. They're there to look for all of the American people and be able to help develop active therapies and take out the ones that are not or that are not well developed or that could hurt somebody. We have a pre-IND meeting tomorrow for one of the CAR-Ts that we're developing for melanoma with my colleague Chris Putzhaus. She received the pre-IND package yesterday, 1 day later than was promised. So there is some delay, but those people are working extra time, the ones that are there and are doing their job.
Good. Helen, beginning of the year, we had 50 companies. We sold 3, so that's good. We now have, we are down to 47, but I think we have 47 problems. Yeah. So how are you solving these issues with funding, the atmosphere on market? How are we handling it?
So it has been really tough for many companies, but not all companies. So many of the companies are laying people off, reprioritizing their pipeline programs to focus on either their lead program or the most attractive program. Companies are also subleasing, these biotech spaces. You typically sign up for, 5-year, 10-year lease. And when the company doesn't have funds, it's hard to get out of that lease. And so many of the companies are subleasing their space to other biotech companies. Some companies actually shut down. None of ours have shut down because of the current financing environment, because we are very active with each of the company's management to try to have the companies be much more capital efficient. But there are companies that are doing well, actually. And it's those companies that really, from the get-go, know how to mitigate risk, and they don't build a whole infrastructure, from the get-go until they have some encouraging data. So, for example, we have a company called Actus Oncology. It's a radioligand company. The company started with discovery platform, initially working on peptide binders. And the founder of the company actually Brian Goodman recently joined Vida Ventures, but he was clever enough and experienced enough to develop backup strategies by in-licensing technologies from, I think, University of Minnesota, and constantly doing landscape analysis. And we were able to also implement clinical development strategy that was actually very clever and allowed us to mitigate risk in the U.S. by going to South Africa, where they have named patient program, where investigators can actually treat patients after imaging. And so we did our dosimetry and biodistribution study in South Africa with one PI. And the PI also treated 2 patients with our drug, targeting Nectin-4. And we're already seeing responses from at least the first scan in these 2 patients. And that allowed us to then commit to filing the IND in the U.S., which has already been cleared. And now the company is scaling to conduct clinical trials in the U.S. and probably in EU. So we have these companies that know how to utilize capital efficiently.
Thank you. Ivan, with no IPOs, I don't know what you're doing all day, but is your position safe at B of A?
Thank God my position is safe, Arie, due to friendships like yours. But this year, we were actually able to get an IPO out of the gate called Metsera. It was a cardiometabolic company.
Another N of one.
Another N of one. The IPO's done very well. It was valued at $2.5 billion. It's traded up. It's the only IPO this year that's traded up. I think what's happened with the IPO market is, as usual with the markets, we had a wide open market in 2021, 70 IPOs per year. If you had a preclinical compound, you could go public, and some good backers. And everybody went wild, and we took a bunch of companies out. And some of them became huge successes, like Prometheus and some of them became huge failures. So the sector was very well funded, and then things cracked. Interest rates went up. Okay, so we swung the other way. Now the pendulum is completely the other way. But I think what's happened, and the reason I think the IPO market is virtually shut, is people are not making money in IPOs. When people don't make money in IPOs, people don't put money in IPOs. And generalists, investors, which we need for a healthy IPO market, are not there now. So in 22, there were 10 IPOs, only one's above water. In 23, there were 11, only 2 are above water. 18 IPOs in 24, only 2 above water. 4 IPOs this year. Our IPO is the only one above water. People are not making money. There are also a lot of headwinds. FDA uncertainty, MFN, tariffs. I think until we get a little more clarity on all these big policy decisions, and until we see interest rates come down a bit, which I know the president is trying to help us all do, I don't think we're going to see the reopening of the IPO market in a big way. We need interest rates to come down because this is the sector with the longest dated cash flows. So when interest rates go up, this is the sector that's hurt the most, right? And I looked at a statistic the other day, and it said that the sector for pre-approval biotechs is trading at 1x EV to cash. So that means the public markets are giving almost zero tech value to every public company. There is a record number of companies that are trading well below cash. And I think at some point that's going to shift. I think good companies are going to get rewarded. I think the ones that have good science are going to get funded. At some point, interest rates are going to go down. At some point, we're going to get policy clarity. And hopefully we settle somewhere in the middle of that pendulum because we need those healthy IPO markets to help fuel this industry.
Love the optimism, and we all share with you that sense. Howard, you have no issues with financing. You're doing well. I mean, that's the big pharma. How is the atmosphere? Is that an opportunity to acquire good technology at a lower valuation? I understand that, the pharma is doing good. Denode just came in. He has no issues either. Life is good here. How do you view? Is it an opportunity for you guys while we are suffering? Is there opportunity, or you are not looking at the you look more on technology rather than in the cost, in the price?
Right. So we're all in this together, first of all. And so Amgen is the world's largest biotechnology company. And historically, half of the marketed products have come from internal innovation, and the other half have come from external innovation. And so we're absolutely always interested in hearing about new technologies, new assets. And I think the companies that survive in this environment will be very strong. And we're looking forward to really connecting with, you've met my Amgen colleague, Helen, Kim, you've met me. And so when you have an exciting idea or asset, please come find us.
Biren, FDA, what do you hear? What's your assessment of what's going on right there at the FDA?
Yeah.
You've written about it.
I've written about it. There's been a lot of changes at the top, as you've mentioned. A few weeks ago, there was an announcement for the head of CBER. As you mentioned, Peter Marks had departed the agency and resigned at the end of March. So about a month later, FDA Commissioner Dr. Arie announced that Dr. Vinay Prasad would be head of CBER. This caused the XBI Biotech Index to drop 6%. I've never seen anything like this in my career. We've had cell gene therapy companies, their shares declined by 20-25% on a single day on that announcement alone. And, if one followed Dr. Prasad's Twitter, he's been quite vocal in terms of his criticism of FDA, of pharma. of certain approvals around COVID vaccines, as well as certain gene therapies for Duchenne's. And then he's also been, I think, a vocal critic of the FDA's criteria in oncology, specifically, that they should be requiring overall survival as an endpoint. So if one's a cell therapy company in oncology and is potentially evaluating a pivotal path through a surrogate endpoint like overall response or duration response, that can potentially lead to significant delays if he, changes, the regulatory requirements. So there was a lot of fear, I think, initially. And since then, Dr. Prasad, I think, has done a few interviews and videos, and I think has calmed everyone's nerves in terms of the use of surrogate endpoints for rare diseases, as well as for, areas of high unmet needs, such as refractory oncology. So I think, I believe it's going to be an evidence-based FDA. I think investors kind of understand the mindset of both Dr. Prasad, Dr. Macri. I think they've been pretty vocal around what they want to see from companies, and I think that's a positive longer term for the sector.
I read 2 days ago, May 20th, your report, which was a good one, CBER Town Hall Recap. Prasad softens on surrogate endpoint in oncology. So the whole fear of the surrogate endpoint, and suddenly everything will be to controlled clinical trials. Can you just elaborate on that? Because we were hit yesterday with one of our companies on a ODAC just because of the fear. Why didn't you do a randomized clinical trial? FDA told us we don't need it, but now everybody wants to do randomized clinical trial because Prasad said he loves it. So maybe you can discuss it. I mean, this is a huge issue that will come up more and more.
Yeah, I think, I had hosted a former deputy director of CBER several weeks ago after Prasad's announcement to try to understand better on how he might, introduce changes within FDA, specifically around oncology, CBER, cell therapy, working with CDER, which manages small molecules, antibodies, ADCs. And it feels like Prasad is going to have to work with Rick Pazdur in terms of guidelines, criteria. And I think Rick Pazdur, to me, is the critical person in terms of driving requirements within oncology. So if it's refractory indication, I believe that surrogate endpoints are acceptable. And that drives cost of capital ultimately at the end of the day in terms of how much companies need from a financing standpoint to get a program across the finish line.
Good. It's really interesting that you guys talk all the time, but we didn't talk about China, and it is behind us. Everybody thinks of that. Everybody who's visited the scene, the really uplift of everything that's happening. We're getting drugs from China. We're starting company in the US based on drugs in China. Who else? Maybe Howard, what's your Chinese view?
There's definitely incredible innovation coming out of China, and so super competitive landscape now. So I think that, but it really even broadly across the industry, if we look at the most basically heavily worked on sort of targets, maybe 10 years ago, there'd be 10 assets going after that same target. Nowadays, there'll be something like 50 assets, right? And so I think that really shows that we have to be much more innovative in choosing new targets, new disease areas, and also be able to prosecute with speed. We definitely keep an eye on basically this worldwide innovation and also with thinking about our tech and workforce strategy globally.
But you saw all the big pharma 2 days ago, Pfizer with their VEGF PD-1 ADC licensing. AstraZeneca is second home for AstraZeneca is China. I mean, there's so many companies now that sit there. Ivan,
I think China is an opportunity and a threat depending on how you see it. I think a lot of our large clients are spending a tremendous amount of time looking for assets in China. A lot of the scientists who are working on these assets in China were trained in the U.S., top institutions, academic institutions, top companies like Amgen, and they're going and they're optimizing well-known targets. And these targets are now becoming available at prices that are reasonable. You can buy a PD-1 VEGF from China like Merck did, like Pfizer did, instead of buying Summit Therapeutics, which is a $15, $20 billion company. So that's an opportunity, and the Chinese companies are very willing to transact, and they're very willing to sell you that one asset that you want. You don't have to buy the whole company. So that's the opportunity. The threat is what's going to happen to U.S. biotech. Is this all going to depress prices in the U.S.? Are the first movers in the U.S. not going to get the same advantage they did? Or is this going to hurt our public markets? And I think there is the threat. And we can't police what's going on in China, how our IP is being protected or not. And I think there's a real, there's a real threat to both academic institutions and to biotech that I think if we're not vigilant about, we may start to lose a bit of our advantage to this wonderful industry that we have.
We have quite a lot of experience with China. 10, 12 years ago, at the days of Kite, when we went there, we could have
2016
molecules for $3-5 million. Now it's about $50 million for a molecule to acquire, and I'm sure that this will become more and more. But more threatening is the idea that we have at least one successful company, a very good company, that decided rather to do one study in the US, to do quick 6 studies in China for equal amount of money or even less. So they decided to go to China and are running very quickly their clinical trials over there. So what will happen? Anything, Tony, what do you hear about, or Helen?
I just wanted to say this whole surge in biotech in China, it was designed that way by the current president of China. In 2015, he started Made in China 2025 campaign, where the government spent significant amount of time and money fostering the biotech community. And they completely revamped their drug approval process to remove hurdles so you can get to clinical trials earlier than you can in the US. And I personally think that given our current situation here in the US with the administration and all the cuts in funding for research, that they will catch up. I read an article in Endpoint, since the last decade, the number of drugs that are in development in China has increased by 1,200%, which is 2/3 of what we have in the U.S.
Okay. Well, I had a whole topic to discuss about the what the Chancellor was describing this morning, and also Dr. Epstein about the entrepreneurial universities and the role of entrepreneurship within the university, and how can we adapt to that, which I think we can. I'm looking at the wrap-up, one last minute that we have. Any burning questions or anyone that wants to make a comment or a question? Yes, please.
I'm Marcel Ayala with Swinnerton. I am really curious to understand, I know it's nebulous times, but always trying to keep an eye on the ball, an eye on the ball. How is this impacting your commercialization strategy and manufacturing, for any potentially successful firms that are going to go into commercialization? What are you thinking about in terms of even manufacturing? And if you're looking at manufacturing, how is this landscape impacting where you're going to manufacture? And if there is a chance to do it in the U.S., is it here in Southern California or is it in some other emerging market?
Howard,
All right,
you have a lot of options.
that clearly is a question for me. Yeah, so absolutely. So of course, this is a very volatile and uncertain environment. Of course, these new issues around tariffs and taxes impacts many companies. Fortunately, Amgen, for example, is an American company. We do a lot of manufacturing throughout the U.S., including Puerto Rico. Thousand Oaks remains actually a drug production site, really a big facility. So yes, there's a large footprint in Southern California. We remain committed to the region.
Okay, we are out of time. Thank you very much, and thank you to the panel for excellent discussion.